Thank you, Rick, and thanks to my colleagues here, and thanks everyone for coming today. I want to start off by just telling you something I often think about. I'm a bit of a historian, and one of the things I like to think about because I deal in change and strategy at Shell. There are more people alive today on this world than have ever died. And I always put that into context because there's so many great minds out there. So if you think of the minds before us, Michelangelo, Leonardo, all those people that did all those great things, there's more people than there ever existed before. So when I think about all the things we're doing, it's a fascinating world and it's changing so fast. And so I'm here to first state that I don't know really what I'm talking about to some degree. Because what I'm talking about, what I think I know, there's so many people that are doing so many innovative things, I haven't caught up yet. So my story is a middle, and middles are messy. So Shell's been doing simulation for some time, and we'll continue to do it. But I'm just a guy in the middle of the story trying to make sense out of the history before us and why we got to where we're at, and how do we get to where we need to go. So let me start with that. This is Shell's version of your auto-signature disclaimer on your email. So this is just for presentations. The point I'd make here is Shell's a very big company, and many of you are in big companies, and big companies are exponentially difficult to change because there's lots of businesses, lots of moving parts, lots of points of view, lots of experience, lots of people that have entrenched experience, that they've done something many times, and that's the way they've done it. They've never seen it. Manufacturing within Shell, one of the lines of business, is very large as well. Now, what I'll say to you about this, you can read those bullets. We're a balanced group, we're a big group, but at the bottom I highlighted it because we all do this because we want plant safety and reliability. And that's one of the markers that I go back to leadership with all the time to say, that's what you want. I want to deliver that for you. I will do that through more competent, reliable staff. The agenda today, I really put it in 4 boxes. I want to give you a little bit about our context. So what's going on, and I kind of did that already. So you'd understand the size of Shell. Then I'm going to give you a little bit about why simulation-based learning. Why did they bring this guy, Shell, into this role, Brent, and say, look at it, make sense out of it, and tell us where we're at today compared to the world. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about, well, what did I learn? So it was a humbling experience to go back and look at smart people like yourselves and smart companies like yourself. So I did that. And the last thing I'll tell you about is, what are we going to do moving forward? And when some of you see this, you're going to even see on this, I have a good idea for you, Brent. And I wish you'd stop me in the hall, because I want to make sure that Shell's a humble company. We don't have all the answers. We do have smart people, and many of them, but I want to be humble to say, I've always got to chase the next big thing. I've always got to chase the next big idea. So why simulation-based learning? We know it's a relevant learning method for high-risk industries. Just like Rick said, aviation. My aspiration, and I'll tell you that later, is I want oil and gas to be managing with simulation just like other high-risk industries. And we'll talk about that. So what is that? So if you look at this, I'll go back, sorry. So the first thing about it is it's a strong fit for the types of tasks that are performed in a manufacturing environment. Physical, control boards, engineering, all those things. People have to see things moving, hear it, see it, turn, spin, all those things, pick it up. Simulation's a good way to learn. Better than a textbook, better than a classroom. It's good fit for high-risk industries because we can't simulate, nor do we want to simulate most of the things we have to train on. They don't occur in the workplace. We don't want them to. The equipment's unavailable. We don't want to tie it up. So we want to simulate it. Third thing is Shell. Actually, I asked somebody in Shell, I said, when was the first OTS put in Shell? The answer I got was 1982. So again, not just 10 years, that's kind of the window I've looked back at, but it's been longer than that. And the last thing is opportunity. The trend is, you think about the technology in the last 5 years, the commercials with Oculus Rift for Christmas. I was surprised that they're bringing this stuff right into your home. So it's quite a structure for us. I'm not going to go long on this slide. This slide is for you to understand that simulation is a learning method, and it's upon us to understand the strengths and weaknesses of that method and when to apply it and when not to apply it. The military uses these media selection models, and they're great for picking out when's the right time to use a simulator, a high fidelity, low fidelity, or not a fidelity. So it's one of the things where, and you can read some of those things, we use it when there's large populations, when we want to focus on skill. We're not going to spend money on simulators, quite honestly, for building knowledge. We want it to be applied skill. We want it when practice is important and feedback's important. So these are the kinds of things you look at. Difficulty, it's hard to learn. Don't put a high dollar simulation for something that's easy to learn. You know, it's important. So if they get it wrong, there's a big consequence. You know, if it's infrequently occurring, I don't get a chance to practice. I don't get to turn around every 2 months. It's every 6 years. And now we're trying to extend that. So in the time delay, I don't have time to ask somebody. I don't need to have time to read it in a book and get to it a day later. Why the project in Shell? And the answer was simple. We thought we could do better. We had assets. They weren't optimized. We had points of view that were in different spectrums of the corner. And I'll go quick over this one. This was a high level of the current state. Those of you who have OTS probably have some that work and some that don't. And what we found is we were probably in par for the industry at about 40% of ours were up and running operational. And again, it's a point of view question. Some people say, hey, you know what, we got our value out of them the first 3 years. They helped us design the plant. They were great, you know, why continue them? Point of view. Well, wait a minute, they're a good training. They're a good engineering tool. Let's keep them valid. Let's keep them reliable. We use the generic models up there, as you can see. We weren't optimizing those. We had points of view that were different. Some sites liked simulation, some sites didn't. When we look at ourselves against our own industry, we're probably okay, you know, we're respectable, but there's other companies that do things better than us. And certainly, organizations or industries that are regulated, aviation, nuclear, they're doing a better job than oil and gas is, in my opinion, right now. And the last thing is, our strategy always guides our choices. So I can be much more competitive given changing workforce, all those kinds of things. And what did we learn about ourselves and our industry? Now, this is my humbling experience. Okay, this is where I want to make sure we know that we weren't doing this as best as we could. We talked to our peer group. We talked to our industry, the people that we thought did things well in certain areas, and I can point to each one of those and say what I thought they really, really did well, better than others. We talked to aviation. We talked to NASA. NASA was great for control room training. And we talked to the academia and the associations that we've got. So we learned a lot. We learned, you know, some things that were, again, I'll use the word humbling. The market trends, if you look at that, training, operator training, is one of the big challenges, but it's also one of the big levers. So if you look at it, yes, it will deliver probably the least impact out of all those, but it's the least cost. So when you think about where do you put your investments, you have to be somewhat relative. So I can get a 1 to 3% potentially for, you know, less cost. Won't spend too much time on this. Lots of data out there around what better performing operators can contribute to reliability, to safety, to downtime, all those things. I won't read all these for you, but I've said some of these before. Okay, and that's our industry in oil and gas, and that's why we were shaping our thoughts. Okay, and I'm not going to go too fast over this one. Here's the brain cogitating at work. There's things going on in the brain, and our research basically said most organizations have a lack of good plans. They weren't flexible, they weren't substantial, they weren't realistic. Simulator isn't always used as it should be. It's sometimes one-dimensional. We're not optimizing what it can do for us. Exercises aren't always well designed. I did a lot of research on simulator-based learning exercises, and typically people don't even know what they're not doing right. Even things like, I can get into in the hallway, but even use of avatars today in virtual reality, most companies aren't doing it right. And then the lack of resources. I can't tell you how many plants say, well, Joe was the guy that always did that and he retired, and it kind of is sitting there, nobody else knows how to do it, and they don't have the interest that Joe did. He loved that stuff. And then the last thing here, the experienced operators, they tend to reject the generic. So the mental models that I have to work with. We did in Shell what we call an opportunity framing workshop. And we got together based on the research, and these were the 9 areas that we said, there's opportunity here. Let's go dig into these and let's form a strategy based on these areas. So that's what my strategy is, based on those things. So we did research, we did the analysis, and you can see what those things are. So what I wanted was, as Shell wants, a competitive, affordable, achievable plan that people believe in and people trust. And I was looking at my Under Armour stock the other day, and Kevin Plank made a great statement that I loved. He said, trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. So one of the things that we've got to do in this space is really make sure that we're effective in how we deploy. And I've got 2 more slides, this slide and one more that I'm going to show you. One of my jobs in Shell has always been delivering kind of strategic change. And you can never go into that endeavor unless you've got these 4 things. They're requisite. Any one of these things missing and you're going to have a failure, and I can tell you what kind of failure you'll have. So you have to have that sense of urgency. If you don't have it, it'll fizzle out in the end. And what we had there, and many people in this conference talked about the crew change, the operators, automation, all those things that you can see and read there. The shared vision. So I've got to create something people believe in and want to follow. They want to sign up to. They believe they can trust that. And what I want is, my vision is, I want oil and gas to be as good at doing this as aviation and the military, as nuclear. That's what I really want to achieve. I need to do that, the updated mental models. Capacity change comes in 2 types. There's a company and a person's intellectual capacity to change, and then there's the general financial, organizational capability to change. So I need to find and make sure I have those to support this strategy. And the last one is, I've got to put in actionable first steps. So if I don't have the right things out the gate, I'm going to have trouble later on. Okay, now I'm going to give you the last slide here. And what I want to do with this one is just tell you a little bit about, made this last night, so might have an error in it, I don't know. But what we look at is, this strategy is going to be about alignment. So it's the vision. Do I have the right vision? Do I have the right mission? And the beliefs, the integration, the support, and then I go back. And those 3 things are the management practices that drive this to be sustainable, to be effective, to be efficient. Then I've got the solution set underneath. So I've got our generics, I've got the unit specific, and I've got the other types, virtual reality and all those things that we want. Now I've got some little bubbles here. And if you can see that, which I can't see it anymore, but again, I want to be as good as nuclear, right? I want those things. I want to build that operational mastery that we talk about so much in Shell. And again, I want to optimize efforts, integration. We've got a lot of different organizations in Shell, but we're kind of siloed sometimes. But when you start working together and thinking together and say, boy, we can really leverage what you're doing and what I'm doing to make it much more integrated. Also, if we look at the support, I need investments vetted. I don't need sites going out making a decision just because the site manager likes that idea. I want to have some kind of taxonomy, some type of guide to say, is that in fact the right decision? Because quite honestly, you're an expert plant manager, but you might not be expert in training simulators. Right solution, right situation, we know that, right? And the centralized support in terms of best practice. What I have found is, most organizations we benchmarked with, they had a great centralized support structure. Not too little, not too much, just about the right amount to make the local sites effective and gain efficiencies centrally. We've got the generics there. And one of the things we want to do is generic. extend their applicability, get the cost efficiencies, and start to build globalized skill sets. So why does every site for process fundamentals have to be different when they develop those? We've got this OTS-like concept. So what we really want is cover high consequence units with stimulated simulators, but for ones that might not be so high consequence, cover those with more software-based simulators that folks like Graham can talk about quite well. And then the last thing is prove and expand to other simulation-based learning methods. Integrated methods. I want a progressive learning value chain, okay? So from theory to practical application. So that is the story of Shell, and I want to be cognizant of time because I'm the first person going up. So with that, I'm going to stop.